Dave, how are you?
We're doing really good. I'm just going to finish this letter real quick.
Okay.
And then, we're talking about the current trend of wrestling. Actually, we got some stuff to say about, we've been watching your tapes, Jim. And you know what? And one thing I got to say is that, because we've said it on the show like almost every day in the last week, that we are probably more interested in your show a week from Wednesday than we are for King of the Ring, because we've known every match on your show.
Well, Fargo's going to be on my show, if you should be.
No, but we've known every match, and I watch your TV, and everything, we're 2 weeks behind on your TV, but everything on your TV reinforces the matches that you're booking for The Last Dance, whereas we watch WWF TV, and like here we are 7 days away from the pay-per-view, and we literally know 2 matches on that pay-per-view. 7 days away. So anyway, I'm going to finish this. Well, okay, go ahead and say something.
I was just going to say, I got to be honest, I'm not up on WWF television myself over the last several weeks because I've been so busy with our show. So I don't know, if I had seen it, maybe I could figure out some way that they were going that they specifically wanted, and I could say, well, hey, maybe they're trying to do this. But the fact is, I don't really know what they've been doing. But I book our television for wrestling fans, and they're writing for entertainment fans, of all walks and shapes and sizes. So I just do what I think wrestling fans would like to see.
Okay, but is there a reason, if you're booking for entertainment fans, that you don't, let's say 3 weeks out, give people the entire card?
I can't think of one, but give me time.
Other than they don't have the card. that's the reason, but, I ask a question. So, I remember you from Smoky Mountain, and I remember one time, I was in, Tennessee, and you were talking to me about a good time to come back and watch Smoky Mountain, and this was probably, I'm guessing, right around now, maybe April or June or something. It was early in the year,
right? And
you were telling me, Thanksgiving would be a good week, and then you showed me your book and did a little shh, and then you showed me the cards for Thanksgiving, like in April or June or something. So
the thing with King of the Ring is this isn't even an aberration because it's like this every month.
Well, you got to understand that to me, and that's the way that it was traditionally done. That's wrestling booking, and to be honest, Vince McMahon, both senior and junior, at WrestleMania of one year used to be able to have a pretty good idea of the WrestleMania main event the next year. But the problem becomes, and the reason why I've got an advantage, I don't care what our TV ratings are because I can't really do that much about it, and we don't have any other outside influences such as merchandising streams and pay-per-view, and partners involved in huge businesses, and you might get a new talent or somebody might break their leg. Let's face it, I don't have any mega superstars, so if one guy breaks his leg, it's not going to screw with me that bad. God bless everybody. I don't want anybody to be hurt, but it's not like I could lose The Rock because I don't have The Rock. So anymore, they're looking at the television ratings every week, and they've got advertisers, and they've got a ton of people, screaming at them from all sides, always satisfy my needs. So there's a lot more changes and a lot more revamps and a lot more, oh gosh, I just thought of this, than there is in a promotion like mine because, I pretty well have got an idea who's going to be here, and barring injury, I'm going to do something, and, I don't care what the ratings are because we can't do anything about it anyway. The ratings are pretty good, actually. We are on a good station here in Louisville in that there are 4 major ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox stations, and then we are on the WB affiliate, which is brand new in the market, really, only about a year, but it has a signal that reaches over 1 million people. It's an incredibly strong transmitter, so it's a young station that's growing, much like OVW is a young promotion that's growing. So we are on a small enough station that they don't just knock the heck out of us for network preemptions, but we're on a station that has an incredible signal and a great reach and is getting bigger, and so as it does, we do well. We generally do a better number than their Saturday night primetime movie, and we're on from 11 p.m. to midnight. We're hovering around a 1.5. Sometimes the bottom falls out of it, and, we did a deal where we got a 1.7 quarter-hour rating for color bars here not long ago. But yeah, there was a mix-up between the station and the cable company, and their feed wouldn't go through, so all the cable customers got color bars. That was the highest-rated quarter-hour of our program.
1.7?
Which shows that Nielsen basically was a mark. I'm sorry?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Well, but the Nielsen ratings are works, and people who buy them and live by them are somewhat marked.
But that's the whole world, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the whole world, every television station and network, but you know what? They don't mean shit.
Okay. Now tell everyone real quick about the basic lineup that you got on the 27th, the final show ever at the Louisville Gardens.
We have the main event, which I think is going to be fabulous, is The Undertaker and Leviathan in a one-on-one match with Mick Foley as referee and Sin in Leviathan's corner. And, I've been happy with Leviathan's progress, and he's an intimidating son of a gun, and probably he's the only guy in OVW that anyone would think could stand up to The Undertaker. He stood up to the Big Show, he stood up to Kane, they've been very competitive, so I think this is a heck of a main event, and it shows one of the OVW guys, a very striking-looking one, in the ring competitive with The Undertaker, which helps us out in this market, and also it should be a heck of a match. And then also the Minnesota Stretching Crew was scheduled to face Perry Saturn and Dean Malenko, and we are on a day-by-day kind of thing with that because Shelton Benjamin still has an elbow injury. Saturn and Malenko will be here. Unfortunately, it may not be able to be the crew, but I just don't know because Shelton's a kind of guy that can suck it up and sometimes do it, but we got to see what the doctor says. But as well, Flash will tear the house down, steal the show with Chris Jericho for the OVW title. I think both guys are looking forward to that. They knew each other in Smoky Mountain just briefly. And Chris has heard a lot about Flash. Flash obviously has followed Chris, so that's going to be a tremendous match, I think. Kurt Angle and Eric Angle once again were scheduled to make their first teaming as pros against Payne and Damien, the Disciples of Sin. But Eric Angle, as you know, had a torn tricep and had surgery, and he got an infection that set him back. So now it looks like I'm going to have to switch places and put someone in Eric's place. Eric will still be present, still be involved in the match, but it doesn't look like he's going to be able to wrestle at this point.
It's going to be
Big Show and Mark Henry are wrestling Mr. Black in the Prototype. Nick Dinsmore and Machine in a rematch with a lot more time of that match that you saw on television they had just recently that was fabulous. Mm-hmm. And, several other matches, including also, this is going to be a highlight of the night, Donna Daring, OVW's rookie referee, is going to wrestle Tony Vanetti, the afternoon drive time DJ for 100.5 The Fox here in Louisville, in the Battle of the Sexes. Is going to make Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs look like a tea party.
I saw that angle, and it reminded me of a bad episode of Blind Date.
Exactly.
I actually saw the same angle in Blind Date about 2 nights later.
The Battle of the Sexes match at the Last Dance is going to be our concession to sports entertainment. And then also, I'm excited, and a lot of people are around town, including the programmers over at the Fox. Everybody remembers the fabulous Jackie Fargo, handsome Jimmy Valiant, Bill Superstar Dundee, Rocky Soulman Johnson, and beautiful Bobby Eaton are all going to be in the Legends ceremony, which is going to be my favorite part of the night, including Jackie Fargo was on the first Gardens wrestling event in June 1970, and he'll be on the last one in June 2001.
Now, how's Bobby Eaton doing over there?
Bobby has been great. As a matter of fact, he started wrestling now over the last 2 weeks in addition to training at classes, and he had a really good match on television in his debut. He has been in the ring quite a bit with Rico Constantino on the Prototype, and they're having some good matches, and I think that Bobby's going to be a tremendous addition to our on-air and in-ring talent roster as well as training. But, it's been great so far because he reminds me of stuff that I don't remember. And brings a fresh approach to things and brings a fresh way of doing stuff in the ring that is a change pace from Danny Davis's at the classes because everybody does things differently. And now the guys are getting a lot more different points of view and feedback on how things would be done.
You know, Jim, one thing cool about that show with using Tony Vanetti is whenever you use like a DJ for a highly rated show, he can just plug the hell out of it for weeks.
Oh, I've never even thought of that. Actually, but no, and also I want to say something. I heard a little bit of the letter you were reading when they first connected me. Not too much of it, but business is going down. Oh, woe is me. Here's the thing. Everybody, they overanalyze everything. Of course, the business is going down. It goes up and down. That's what it does for the past 90 years or whatever. And it was time for it to go down because it was just about as big as it could be. And WrestleMania was the record.
Okay, that's true. That's true, but it's going down. If it was just slowly going down, it's one thing, but it's going down way too fast. It really is.
I mean, the quicker it goes up and the farther it goes up, the quicker it's going to drop off, but that doesn't mean that everybody's going to go broke and, the end is near.
Well, everybody did go broke.
Except for everybody matters. I mean, Eric Bischoff, Ted Turner, I don't care, they can go broke. Paul Heyman, he can go broke. I don't care. But anybody that matters. I think the thing is that you got to cool something off and then get something started again. And as I told Russo one time, I said, what happens if you floor a car and you just drive the engine as hard as you possibly can for as long as it goes until it blows up? I said, you don't want to do that. It's a good thing for it to go down a little bit just so that everybody can go, okay, we need to revamp some things and blah, 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 and then you shoot something else. I mean, Jerry Jarrett used to be able to turn a territory around in 3 weeks on a small regional scale. It takes longer nationally. It takes longer, the bigger you are, but it can still happen and happen pretty easily. But Russo did learn something about what I told him, because he engineered then the biggest blow-up of an engine of a well-funded wrestling company in the history of man.
Yes, he did.
It's nice to people learn things.
Let's see. Did WCW ratings ever fall as drastically as the last 9 weeks of WWF? No, not even close. Let's see. What else?
There's not a dogfight anymore on Monday nights.
That hurt.
And if you get somebody watching Springer, they want to see people argue and fight. They don't want to hear one guy bitching for 10 minutes about how miserable he is and yelling at somebody that's not there. So you've got to now get them interested in something else besides the idea of the dogfight.
Do you think WWF creating a war with their own WCW will work that way?
I don't know whether it'll work as well or not in that respect as it did when everybody knew that they were two companies that were at war. Now they know it's one entity that owns both, and the fact of Vince and Shane being at odds with each other over who's got, which I'm, actually loving to see what goes on there. But I don't know if that's as much of a curiosity to watch, that people watch because it was like two trains colliding with each other, and what nasty thing are they going to say about each other? I think WCW is a great opportunity to establish interest in a different kind of wrestling promotion or a different wrestling promotion and let it get its own fans. And the payoff, as it usually is long-term when people get into WCW, hopefully as much as some of the WWF, and they have some type of interpromotional matches. That's going to be, it's tailor-made for Japan. Maybe they can educate the people here that that's something that they'd rather see than the Jerry Springer type, is Ted going to hate Vince this week. It'd be better for the business long-term overall.
It's from Garen Shea, who said that, he goes, I believe that Nick Goulas used to run Louisville in the 60s. Who promoted Louisville before that?
Actually, Goulas opened up June of 1970 at the Gardens. Louisville was dormant for, I think, almost the whole decade of the 60s because it was actually a city that was owned by Dick the Bruiser's Indianapolis territorial office. But they never ran it in the 60s because it didn't do any well or any good for the few times they did run it in the early 60s. It was a dead wrestling town. And so when Goulas and Roy Welch decided to expand northward to Evansville, Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky, and Lexington, Kentucky, they got television on in these markets, and Christine Jarrett was the local promoter that handled those towns. And so 1970 was really the first wrestling history of Louisville for like the previous decade, and then in the 50s things were all over the place on an intermittent basis.
So that was actually the
Before
first.
Before that, you go back to Elvira Snodgrass and Mildred Burke, and I don't know that much about the wrestling history of Louisville back then.
That's about the only match that I remember from that one too. Let's see. Could Jim tell the story he told on RF Video about when Roy Welch shot Sam Bass? I don't know the story.
Well, the guys in the Tennessee territory and all over the South, they were big ribbers back then, but they were heavy ribbers. And
yes, with guns.
And shooting each other was one of the better ribs. There was a famous story about the Fargo brothers shooting each other. But no, here's what happened.
See, Johnny Valentine was nothing with that stuff with on the food and everything.
Well, no, but hold on, there's more to the story. There was a lady that worked in the wrestling office in Nashville that was fairly susceptible to a lot of these ribs. The X-Lax and the candy thing when there was no bathroom on that floor and the whole 9 yards. And so one day, Sam Bass comes into the office and says, I want to see Roy Welch about my money. And she's like, well, Roy's busy. Well, never mind, I'll go in there. And the door slams, and there's all this cursing and commotion going on, and bam, hear a gunshot, bam, another one. she runs in there, and there is Roy Welch with a gun in his hand standing over Sam Bass laying on the floor. And Roy says, we got to get rid of the body. I can't remember the lady's name. We got to get rid of the body. Help me. And Roy Welch made her help him carry the body down the back stairs and throw it in the dumpster, is the way I heard the story. Well, Sam, it was a blank gun. That's what they always did. That's what the boys did in front of people. So Sam jumps up as soon as they go back in, runs up the other way, and when they come back into the office, there's Sam in Roy Welch's chair slumped over with his tongue hanging out like he resurrected himself and died again, and the woman just crapped all over herself.
Oh, my God.
But, you know, the guys used to do that with blank guns and things. They'd shoot each other as soon as they could get a good crowd or a witness or somebody that would be real entertaining for them.
Oh, jeez. As far as like the OVW and everything, and as far as like, you know, we saw the Dinsmore Machine match on TV a couple weeks ago, which was really, really good. As far as some of the other guys, how's Prototype doing? Who do you think are the closest guys ready to go to the WWF or WCW?
Well, Prototype, to answer the first question first, has been a pleasant surprise. Prototype is, to be honest, he missed out on some background on some basics and you know the rules of thumb and everything. He hasn't worked in a wrestling promotion so far until here that is actually run like an old-time territory with rules and regulations and political things and conduct that, you know, the typical Bill Watts 101. But he's a dedicated young guy. He's very driven. He is an overachiever. He is very prepared. He takes matters into his own hands, you know, and gets stuff done, which I've appreciated since the first day he got here. And also, personality-wise, he has great expressions, and he's really animated, and he has a ton of personality. His promos are excellent. And, you know, he and Rico Constantino together as the role model and the prototype of the role model, which is them. Once again, it's them. You know, they could be a Midnight Express caliber tag team with a really good year of dedication to teamwork. That's how good I think they are so far.
Wow.
And better talkers. Taking me out of the picture.
Now, as far as now, when do Nathan Jones and John Heinrich show up?
Dates are still to be determined, but sometime next month. You know, we're taking about a week off from everything after the Gardens event, and then we come back for a couple of days, kind of piddle around, and then we get back started. So sometime after that. Okay.
Is there anybody else coming in?
We have heard a couple of different names of you know, either guys that they wanted to send down here for a couple of weeks, or elsewise somebody that was coming in. But I hate to say anything now because nothing's for sure yet. And we've talked about David Flair, and David is going to be coming here, but I don't know when. They've got to get his paperwork done, and all that other stuff is what I've heard. And but I'm going to be real excited about that. I definitely would love to have Ric Flair's son here training, not only because he's a great kid, but also because, you know, that's the ultimate compliment that any kind of wrestling training center could have is having Ric Flair's son and knowing that Rick, you know, was definitely in favor of him coming here. This is where he wanted him to come. So, you know, I'm pleased over that one.
We get a lot of emails about your training school. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, you know, actually, Danny Davis started the school here about 7.5 years ago, and Nick Dinsmore and Conway and Damaja and, you know, a host of other, Jason Lee, a lot of those guys were trained here by Danny, and they're from the area. And, you know, the fact that those are the best guys, I think, you know, for work, even though they've had a bit more experience than the rest of the guys, that those are our core workers, I think, speaks highly of how Danny did on his own. And then when we got the WWF arrangement down here and we got the chance to get guys relocated here from all different parts of the country, you know, we've got tremendous athletes. But that's what we've concentrated on now. We still have a class that's open to guys that want to walk in and see what they've got, and we call it the amateur class, and it's like a $500 tuition. And for that $500, they get to work out for 6 months in the amateur class and be evaluated and see if they've got what it takes. And if they do, then they're invited to join the advanced class, which is an additional charge, but then they go into the OVW talent roster. Johnny Spade's another guy who graduated from there, and our referees, all of our referee staff, you know, came through Danny's amateur class. So, you know, we've got several different functions going on, and that we still take guys that want to walk in and see what it takes. We also have the regular class that serves the WWF developmental guys and our guys that have graduated, enough to be involved in that level of a class. And then every once in a while we have guys like B.J. Payne who walked in, or Donna Daring, who walked in on recommendations from other people, and immediately were good enough to go right on the roster. And those are the kind of people that I like to put in Machine. I like to put those guys on the roster because they are subject to getting a WWF deal if the right people like them.
Mm-hmm. And what happened with Jason Lee? Because I know when he showed up in WCW, without telling you guys, you were pretty angry about that, and he's back now.
Well, Jason, everybody loves Jason. Jason is a complete wise ass. Jason is a smart aleck. Jason is a character. Everybody likes Jason. Jason was stressing over not being able to go anywhere in the wrestling business. And I think that he and Derek King, as the Suicide Blondes, are probably the best actual tag team in the ring in the business right now, just as far as being a great bleach blonde heel bumping tag team. But they don't have a lot of size. And so Jason took some bad advice from somebody and decided to go down and see what would happen in WCW if he showed up and wowed them and maybe he could get a job. Jason didn't share it with me because he thought that I'd be mad at him. I wouldn't let him do it, which I probably wouldn't have, but for the right reasons, not to scream out of a payoff. But he went down there and he was only called to do the one thing, and then they are basically went out of business.
They went out of business. Yeah.
What we were mad about was that Danny and I both felt, and Jason understands this now, and everybody's made up and everything, but he was wanting to try to go and do something, which I can understand. But we said, as friends, not as your employers, but as friends, as people that have always tried to help you, and we think, it's family here. We said, you didn't tell us something that big. You didn't ask our advice. You didn't see what you should watch out for. You just didn't even tell us and let us know, just as courtesy, Jason, that wasn't the best thing to do. We hashed it all out. He agrees with that. He didn't do it for the wrong reasons. He didn't do it for malicious reasons, but I was ticked off because I didn't know whether he was coming back or not when I turned on the TV and I seen him. But he wanted to try to get ahead, and he made a decision that probably didn't help him for a while, but Jason's a good athlete, and he's a good talent, and everybody likes him, and he's part of the family. He's the redheaded stepchild right now, but he's back, and he's going to be. I have nothing bad to say about Jason as a talent. And the only thing I have bad to say about Jason as a person was that he hurt my feelings because he didn't include me in on something that was important.
Okay. Now, we've had some guys on from your promotion, and they tell us about, you have pretty much courses and reading material, and actually we've talked about it too. What are some of the things that when those guys get there, as far as like teaching them, because you're basically trying to teach them what wrestling really is, the history of wrestling, that few people know, actually.
Well, I just feel like if they're going to enter a profession, they ought to know everything there is to know about it, why it got this way, who made it this way, what can be done to make it better, and what's been done in the past to make it worse so that you don't repeat the same mistake twice.
I like that one. That last one's very important.
Well, exactly. I mean, you got to understand, why am I doing this? How did this come to be? Why is this the way this is done? So I give them memos on things. When something comes up, I'll just say, that's a memo, and I'll write something out about the way that I feel about what came up, whether it be somebody not reading their booking sheet or, a great match that everybody's raving over. Or, in the Observer, unfortunately it's morbid, but when somebody passes away, I copy the obituary, and I give it to them, because that way they have read about a lot of top names from the recent and distant past that did a lot of great things, and I think that's interesting. Sometimes I copied the Fall Guys forum, so that they would understand kind of how the business was formed, and I just made a deal with Chris Newman at the Wrestling Channel, who is also involved in publishing Luthez' book. I got some copies of that I've given to everybody to read, because, would you be a baseball player and not want to read a book about Babe Ruth? Mm-hmm. That way they understand what's going on. But it's also, as far as videotapes, I give them a lot of training tapes. I don't give them as many as I should, actually, because we're so busy putting the show together, but I'm going to do more of those. It could be something from 2 years ago. It could be something from WrestleMania. It could be something from the 60s. But it represents a good example of what I think that a person, contributed to the business, or this is how it used to be, or watch how these guys do this, or whatever. And, hopefully to make them more comfortable, because the guys at that point in time, the top guys were more experienced and were more comfortable in the ring, and they moved more naturally. you know, I mean, it just memos about the way we do things and the way I expect them to do things. And, you know, I don't legislate or dictate anything they should do outside their private time, you know, or whatever. But from 6:30 at night until 10 o'clock or whatever on showtime, here's what time you get here, here's what you do, and here's where you make sure you are and don't leave till it's over. Stuff that is basic wrestling 101 that is never told to anybody anymore. And so when they go to the WWF, they act like buffoons and they make mistakes.
Okay, guys, now it's time for the trivia question to win the tape of the week, brought to you by the great folks at RF Video. Check out rfvideo.com for tons of pro wrestling tapes. Got almost as much as Jim has.
Actually, he's gotten some of his from me, but that's another story.
Yeah. The first 3 people to respond correctly by email to Dave Meltzer at eYada.com. And remember that, don't send it to the Observer thing. Dave Meltzer at eYada.com will win a copy of the 1994 Super J Cup, and that is an awesome tape. And here's today's question. Although the WWF Bills, and Jim knows everything when it comes to this stuff. So you cannot say...
I won't try.
Okay, you may not know this, but I think you do. Actually, I'm pretty sure you do. And I know Brian does, so I think Brian does. Anyway, let me get to this. Although the WWF Bills Kurt Angle as the only Olympic gold medalist in the history of the WWF, that is actually not true. Who was the other Olympic gold medalist to perform in the company? First 3 guys to answer correctly. All right, and also I want to congratulate James Cummings of Sunman, Indiana. He is our first eYada radio raffle winner.
And also, folks, I just want to jump in. When you're sending in your answers, please send your mailing address. It makes it so much easier if you're the winner rather than me having to track you down via email. So please send in your mailing address so that I can forward it to the folks at rfvideo.com.
Okay, there you go. All right. We're going to go to Ed in Texas. Ed, you're first up with Jim Cornette.
Yeah, hey, guys. First off, I want to say that it's an absolute honor to talk to one of the greatest wrestling minds ever.
Well, hey, Dave, who else is on the show besides me tonight?
They're talking about Brian.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brian.
And
actually, my brother pretty much said that to me the other night. We were out, and he actually had some very unkind things to say about certain guests we've had on the show, and his feeling of their lack of knowledge of wrestling. And he just goes, you know, there's really very few people that you've had on that I think really understand wrestling. And I go, well, who does? And he just goes, well, Jim Cornette, obviously.
Oh, my God.
And then he goes, and Brian, of course. Those were like the first 2 names he said, so.
Hey, I text her in the mail, but...
Okay, and my first question for you, Jim, is how did you come about making a jobber tag team by the name of Dave Meltzer and Wade Keller in Smoky Mountain, and which one did you make do the job?
Actually, that was the prospect of being up really late at night trying to write the television the day before the show, and I needed someone or 2 names that the Rock and Roll Express, I believe it was, would enter the ring under masks and beat the champions for the heavenly bodies for the belts. And I said, well, now, who would it be a hoot for me personally to just say, I don't know who those guys are? And it came up Meltzer and Keller. Of course, this was before Wade proved himself to be the scum of the earth that we know he is today.
Wow. Dave still gets emails from people who think that was actually him.
Well,
the one that they think was...
They don't say that it's not. They just say Dave Meltzer and Wade Keller.
The one that people think was me was the one Herb Abrams did it, which wasn't for... Herb Abrams, had some guy and, had, Steve Williams and some other guys just kill. And I think they even had Steve Williams pour dirt on the Dave Meltzer. And,
oh, God.
Well, in this case, you can rest assured in the fact that Meltzer and Keller won the tag team titles, as I remember the way the thing went.
Okay, and then the other thing I'd like to ask is I'd like to just drop 5 names of some of my favorite wrestlers who unfortunately are no longer with us.
Okay.
And I'd like to get your thoughts on them.
I'll try.
And they would be David and Kerry Von Erich, Gino Hernandez, Art Barr, and Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer.
Well, starting with, I actually never met David Von Erich. We were never in the same place at the same time until he passed away. But now the other one was Kerry. Did you say?
Mm-hmm.
Kerry, we worked with quite a bit, and I knew fairly well in Dallas, and then also when we would cross path on the mega shows and etc. And Kerry was actually, God, he was a star. And it's a shame, as Dave wrote in his obituary, the way that things turned out. But for a while there, he was as hot as anybody, and he was not a bad worker. A lot of the Von Erich got a knock for being, crummy, and some of it justified. But Kerry wasn't bad with a talent that could really go with him and work his style. Gino I knew just during the time that we worked in Dallas, and Gino was Gino. What you saw on television was Gino. He was, he lived in the most expensive apartment in the suburb of Dallas and drove the sports car with all the jewelry, and so Gino was Gino, and he was really successful that's where he wanted to be, I think, was Texas, because he could have gone other places, but I think he rather just enjoyed that life there. Uh-huh. And so he was, quite successful, but it was part of the deal that, Gino and Chris were the homesteading heels to go along with the homesteading baby faces. Mm-hmm. Did you mention Art Barr next?
Yes, sir.
I knew Jesse. Obviously, I managed his brother, Jesse, in Memphis, one of the first guys I ever managed. And I'd met Art basically when he came to WCW as juicer that time. And then, that was the time, was it not, Dave, help me, when some goof in Oregon wrote letters to the newspaper and WCW got mad at him?
There were a bunch of people that wrote that. There was a reporter in Oregon who wrote stories about it, and then they got forwarded to Jim Herd, and then there were complaints in some cities, which were probably by opposition promoters trying to cause trouble.
Yeah.
But eventually, what happened was Art Barr had a guilty plea for, I want to get the charge right because it's been misinterpreted, but it was a rape charge that he plea bargained down on, I believe.
Yeah, whatever the plea was, let's all be honest. Art Barr was fiddling around with some ring rat in the daggum stairway of a building, and the Portland Territory noted for having the youngest rats in the history of the business.
Well, she was not underage. She was 19. I just want to make that clear, because everyone always thinks that was... Not that I'm justifying anything. I just want to get the story straight.
I'm justifying it, because the thing was, the arena rats in Portland were like swarming when they were 12, and here was a 19-year-old girl that Art Barr was fiddling with in a stairway somewhere, is the way that I heard the story. And basically, I think she got mad probably because he blew her off. God knows that's never happened in the wrestling business. And complained and wanted to stick a thumb in him. And that's what happened. So he leaves the territory to go continue his career after never going to jail and, making the whole court thing go away. And some reporter who's obviously a perfect human being and very righteous and has never made a mistake or never done anything wrong and never cheated the collection plate in church decides to continue to write columns about how horrible it is that this heinous rapist has been, perpetrating his crimes in a new area now that he's on television nationally, and got enough people to write to WCW that Jim Herd noted for his lack of backbone in anything otherwise than yelling at sundry office employees, basically ixnayed the guy, which it was a load of crap on everybody's part. He was a real nice kid and a real nice guy and very good talent and didn't deserve that, in my opinion.
Okay, and it was actually a blessing in disguise, because it ended up where he had to go to Mexico, where he became a superstar. But he never got to Mexico.
It didn't turn out well, so I always wonder what the blessing was if he could have just stayed in Atlanta and ended up making a lot of money on one of these contracts that came along shortly thereafter and being featured on national television in his home country.
Possibly.
And with the cruiserweights yet to come in. He could have been the first.
And they would have screwed him up like they did everybody else.
Well, sure, but he made a lot of money in the process.
That's true.
He would have been such a good heel, he might have actually got over.
And then he would have been screwed up just like everybody else. It would have been worse for him. I mean, the one thing with people always ask me what would happen if Art Barr would have lived, and he would have gone to WCW, probably with Eddie Guerrero, and the first thing they would have done was, because they were such an awesome team, was break them up. And then he would have
with each other.
Yeah, and then he would have ended up in the same position that all those guys did that were really, really talented, and he probably would have been real frustrated. But him and Eddie Guerrero probably would have gone to ECW first before they ended up in WCW. So that's probably what would have happened.
And then very well may have ended up in the WWF on a Radicals type of deal.
He may actually would have been he may have been the fifth Radical if we go that far. That's
you
true.
Never can tell. You never can tell about things that would happen. If somebody was in a different place. But it's a shame sometimes that you never get a chance to find out.
Yeah. Anything else, Ed?
Yeah, well, the last guy was Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer.
Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer. Great talent, not a very bright person, and I won't go any further because I didn't like him much, and I don't want to speak ill about the dead.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, thanks very much for taking my calls, guys. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to Hector in Texas. Hector, you're next up.
Hello, I'm talking about Art Barr. I just got When Worlds Collide today, and I was seeing the tape. And
you won that tape, right?
You won on that show, this show.
You won that tape a week ago, right?
Yeah, and I just got it today and watched it. And I went to WrestleMania, too, so I watched both shows. And I have to say that if you compare the top 5 matches from WrestleMania to the 5 matches in when Worlds Collide, I'd say WrestleMania was better. But, like, the show overall, I have to go with When Worlds Collide.
Well, there was no bad matches.
This year, right?
Huh?
WrestleMania this year?
Yes. Yeah, because Jim Cornette was there. That also made it great.
Thank you, Hector. Your check is on its way as well.
Yeah.
How did they get you to fly to that show anyway?
Huh? Well, actually, they invited us, and I felt it was bad manners not to go, and also the lovely and talented Sin has never been to WrestleMania, so basically I got me some Xanax and got on a plane.
Okay.
I want to talk about something else. The thing I wrote on the website about the Big Show, a lot of people got a line that I said wrong. I said that Kane sells more merchandise than Benoit, but I didn't mean that to say like all big men sell better than little men, because I got a lot of emails about that. All I was saying is that it's not just wrestling that counts, because there's no way Kane would be selling more than Benoit if it was just about wrestling. And the purpose of the column was to say that the big men still have a purpose in this business. I don't think they're being used right. And I don't know why everybody talks about Big Show being a bad performer, because he is, but like the WWF didn't hire him. The WWF didn't hire him to be have 3-star matches or 4-star matches, because he never had those in WCW. So I don't understand the point now saying, well, he's not doing good. Well, he never did good.
Yeah, but he was over more.
Some potential there that he has not attained yet.
He was a bigger star in WCW than he was in WWF for a variety of reasons, and the main one being that we've talked about many times is that the WWF having so many bigger guys, he didn't stand out size-wise, whereas in WCW, where the smaller guys, I mean, he could be the giant. In WWF, he's just the bigger guy than The Undertaker and Kane and Prince Albert and those guys.
That's really the WWF's fault for booking him that way, because if you're going to put him in there with guys 6'8", 6'10", he's not going to look that impressive. And
I got a question for Jim, because Jim is
actually, I got to admit that Hector lost me on the point of his query about halfway around the second bend.
No, but I was going to ask you because you have Leviathan,
yes,
who wrestles like a monster, and when he goes to the WWF, you know, it's going to be tougher to be a monster just because, you know, there are guys his size there, whereas in your territory, there's nobody his size there.
But you know what? A monster is not just big. And when Leviathan was in the ring with Big Show, I truthfully believe, while Big Show was the veteran talent, I think that Leviathan pretty well carried off his part of the bargain, that people thought that he could whip the Big Show's ass. Leviathan, by the time he goes to the WWF, I sincerely hope that he is a monster instead of a big guy. And Charlie Manson was only 5'4" and 140 pounds, but everybody was scared to death of him.
Until he fell off that ladder.
It was in his body language and in his magnetism, and that's what Leviathan has. It's not just about size, because he's not just Andre the Demon. He's the demon of the dadgum deep.
That was a great skit, by the way, with Sin backstage at SmackDown.
Oh, that was just
introducing the.
When she choked Kevin Kelly and everything. When he was choking Kevin Kelly.
Yeah, we've got 4 personal injury lawsuits from WWF employees against Leviathan right now as a result of his backstage rampage.
I just thought it was I don't know why.
Nobody saw Leviathan until he stepped in the camera view. Like he was hiding behind this 10-foot cameraman.
Well, see, that's because he's a demon. He's the guardian of the gates of hell, so he just materializes.
I don't know why, but my favorite part of that thing was when Sin comes up to Kevin Kelly, and Kevin Kelly goes, "Hi, Sin, what do you want?" or something like. I don't like it's like, well, you know, I know, Sin, what are you doing here?
Well, actually, my favorite one was when they approached Harvey Rippleman, and he said, "I don't know where the pizza place is, Bruce. Hold on." But, you know, by the way, we have neglected to tell all the millions of people listening to the program that you can actually see and own and possess and caress these OVW television tapes in the privacy of your own home by going to ovwrestling.com, and you can get shows, you know, a month's worth of shows on one tape and subscribe and the whole 9 yards.
And I would recommend
getting raves from
It is well worth it. Are they still every month now, or are they going to 2 weeks?
It's 4 shows on a tape, so like September of 2000 or December of 2000, whatever, it's the month's worth of shows.
Yeah,
okay,
I would recommend
it. Going to be 4 shows?
Say again now?
From this point forward, it's still going to be 4 shows on a tape, or is it going to 2?
No, that's what I said. It's going to be 4 shows on a tape. Why?
Okay.
What have you heard?
Well, we've been getting 2 shows per tape, and I wasn't sure if that was the same subscription service.
Oh, no. This is that's a separate mailing list.
Okay.
You know, basically, when you go to the website, you can buy the television shows, and it's 4 shows on a tape, 1 month's worth, or 5 in some months, and they're like $19.95. Mm-hmm. What you guys get is to keep you farther up to date because you'd be a month behind if we did it otherwise.
Okay,
right.
Cool.
I wanted to get one last question in. If they both wanted to go to WWF and they were both healthy, who do you think would be more valuable to the WWF, Bret or Goldberg, Bret Hart?
Who would be more valuable instantly? Goldberg. Bret had, I think, a period of time where they basically made him, insignificant as a wrestler. As a person to fight Vince, or a person to be mad at Vince, I bet Bret would go through the roof. But as a person to plow through, the WWF field on the way to Austin and Rock and Taker, Goldberg would be more valuable. But I don't know what the realistic chances are of either of those happening anytime in the foreseeable future.
Okay. Thanks for taking my call.
Okay.
What are some other rules of conduct for the guys down there at OVW as far as like baby faces and heels being together and that sort of thing?
Well, they never are. It's just it's nothing major. I don't have a dress code. I mean, Bill Watts used to fine you $50 if you came to the building in shorts. It was unprofessional. He fined Dr. Death one time $50 for running in to save somebody while he was wearing flip-flops. I mean, we're not as strict
but he never did it again.
Yeah, exactly. But, there are certain things that you do and you don't do in the wrestling business, and we try to, you're an hour ahead or an hour and a half, whatever the scheduled arrival time is for a show, you're there, especially on television. If you're not, you don't get on the show. You come to class, you don't try to chicken out early, just the basic things that guys need to know in the wrestling business. See, a lot of the reason why that some guys get reputations as being goofballs is because they come from these outlaw shows where as long as you show up in time to go in the ring and you figure out what you're going to do on your own and you do anything that comes up and get on the microphone at any point in time and stop the match to, have coffee, whatever, and then they go to a professional promotion and everybody thinks they're eggheads. And we just, getting guys' minds early. This is not a mud show at the local fall and crawl, and, this is the way that the standard wrestling promotions have always been run, and it's easy. It's not easy if nobody tells you. It's not easy if you don't know to do it, but it's easy. It becomes second nature, and it's like how you go to work.
I am wading through this pile of wrong answers. There are so many wrong answers here, and there is one right one, and I don't want to say who it is because he might tell other people, but there is a right one, and the one that's, there's 2 names that are getting tons of mention. I'm not going to say who they are, but I will later. Let me see. God, I haven't found one. But anyway, I want to make this clear, though, that I said Olympic gold medalist. There's one name here that was never in the Olympics, but everyone thinks he was, but he wasn't. There's another couple of names here that are being mentioned who were in the Olympics, one of whom even actually medaled in the Olympics. Now, these are guys who are in the World Wrestling Federation.
Know very well.
Yes. And I want to make clear that these are guys who wrestled in the World Wrestling Federation. I'm not talking about, somebody like, Ali showed up at a couple of shows, but he never did a professional wrestling match for the WWF. He did one for New Japan was his match. Or Lennox Lewis, who never did a match. I'm talking about a guy who was a wrestler in the World Wrestling Federation. Oh, I got another one here who was here. God, I've got so many here. Anyway, let me get to this. This is from Mike King. He goes, I have to comment on a couple of things Jim Cornette said. I love the analogy of the wrestling business to a car engine. Still, I'm positive that Vince Russo didn't learn a damn thing from blowing up his car. I'm so convinced he did nothing wrong I'm so convinced that he thinks he did nothing wrong. I'm sure, yeah. And that WCW would have turned around under his guidance. I actually believe that he believes that.
No, I know he does, because he's not ever going to think otherwise, because that would mean that he is not the ultimate genius of wrestling that he thinks that he is. And that's why that he blew up the engine, because he thinks he's the ultimate genius of wrestling.
Okay, and he goes, while I agree with the nature of the business going up and down, a great deal of the reason for the WWF's current downturn is due to booking things that are so idiotic it's not funny, things Jim would never do, things that I would never do, and I'm a moron. Actually, there's...
Wow. Hey, Jim, let me ask you a question. Would you have turned Steve Austin heel at WrestleMania?
I don't know that I'd have done it at WrestleMania, although that was a good time to do it. I don't think that I would have done it, because I'm on the queasy side. I always like to err on the side of safety. I don't think I would have done it when The Rock wasn't going to be around.
Man, I found the... Okay.
But I like the idea, because then it freshens him up and it presents something new. Even if it was a fight, it was a gutsy move to do it, because that may mean that business a year and a half from now is going to be booming again.
Wasn't the right time to do it.
I just look at it more as, he took that year off or whatever from the neck injury, and I think that when he came back at Survivor Series, he was fresh again. And I think turning him at WrestleMania, like you said, with Rock leaving, that was just real bad timing.
Yeah, I would have been scared to do it without Rock around, but I think, even if he was fresh, he was still somewhat the same. I like the idea of doing it. I may have done it at a different time. That's me, but I think that it may mean that things are going to be really big down the line, which is what I always like to. I don't like to do things thinking they're going to draw this week. I like to do things thinking they might draw in 2 or 3 months, and in a situation like that, you're looking at a year or 2 year timetable.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Trent Walters, who goes, why was Robbie Dix released?
In a nutshell, Robbie had a lot of talent, but he didn't progress. He came in as a pretty good talent and left as a pretty good talent. He didn't grow like the other guys did, was one thing they were looking at. And another thing is, unfortunately, Robbie, his effort was not lacking, but his good judgment was, and he placed himself in a couple of positions where he shouldn't have been if he'd used good judgment, and that didn't help him when it came time to look at guys that were on the bubble.
Did he throw a punch at Leviathan?
As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that didn't show very good judgment.
I had heard that. I read that in Brian's newsletter. Now, as far as the guys that work in Ohio Valley, what expenses does WWF cover, and what expenses does OVW cover as far as like the running of the company?
Okay, so basically, OVW covers the expense of running the company. If the WWF wants to provide the guys that are down here with something, that will benefit them, more than what we can provide or can afford on the budget or whatever, then they will they've contributed a lot of equipment, a lot of rings, because they want to make sure the guys don't get hurt. They want to make sure the rings are kept up well. So they've contributed some rings, canvases and equipment. We're getting a set of scales in so that, because you can't just find scales that'll weigh guys that are, 350 and up every day. So they contribute to scales, stuff like that. So it's a situation where, in terms of covering our expenses of running the company, no, they don't do that, but they sure do buy us a lot of things that makes the company better that we wouldn't be able to afford all at one time.
Did you get anything from WCW from what they boxed? I know they were giving some rings away and probably some other stuff as well.
Actually, because we had just really gotten a couple of new rings, we really didn't need anything. They took some of the exercise equipment that they had down there at the power plant and took it to Stamford, I think, where they're going to, maybe use something for Toughen Up and maybe use something for, for the studio up there, and then, eventually we'll get some of that stuff when that run is over with, et cetera. So we really, there wasn't a lot in Atlanta that we were in need of.
Let's go to Ken in Kentucky. Ken, what's going on?
How you guys doing?
Hey,
really good.
Hey, listen, Jim, it's an honor to talk to you. I wanted to ask a couple quick questions. I don't know if you want to answer this one or not, but what do you think the philosophical difference is in the way you and Paul Heyman view wrestling?
I look at it as an art that I have a passion about, and Paul Lee looks at it like a New Yorker.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Have you ever been to New York?
I have.
Well, then you should know what I'm talking about.
Well,
Actually, you think of New York in a different way than a lot of people.
What part of Kentucky are you from?
Around Louisville.
Oh, well, excellent. So, what was your opinion of New York?
Probably the same as yours.
You guys are talking a different language now. Oh, anyway.
Hey, wait a minute now. I'm from New York. What's so bad about it?
Nah, nothing, Al.
Well, all it is I'm glad actually.
Got a New York attitude, though.
I think the Civil War was a work. I think that the South put the North over so that they would have to take the area and live in it as their ultimate everlasting punishment. But at any rate,
that sounds like some of those wrestling history books.
The booking philosophy between basically I don't like that he did to the business in terms of how more difficult he made it for the guys in the ring. Paulie is a limited in-ring performer. I've had to work with him several times, and to be honest, he's the only guy that I ever blew up. He was always scared he was going to get hurt. You'd grab him, he was tensed up like a table leg. He went with this extreme formula, I don't think, showing enough respect, if not caring or compassion, enough respect for the guys' bodies that he was employing. Mm-hmm. And he occasionally he'd go through a table, so he'd prove he's hardcore too. Nah. He'd never let himself get set on fire, did he? I think it was crap, a lot of the stuff that he came up with on his television that either made people think that wrestling was a stuntman show or a bunch of freaks with tacks and mousetraps stuck on them. I think that he was appealing to the lowest common denominator of taste with his heavy metal hardcore audience he was going for and doing bad taste in just about everything to the point where the television stations wanted to kick him off the air. And I think he made the business a lot harder for the guys to get response without fracturing their bodies and shortening their careers. In a nutshell, that's the difference between his booking philosophy and mine. I like stuff that could actually reasonably happen, that people can do without killing themselves or hospitalizing themselves, and a little bit more taste. I want to do bad taste and good taste.
Okay, that's a lot clearer. And the last couple questions, real quick, and this kind of goes along the same line as what previous caller said, except these two stars a little more mainstream. Just what you think about them in the WWF, Mick Foley and Hunter Hearst Helmsley?
Everybody knows, almost everybody's opinion of Mick is the same. He's the sweetest, nicest guy. He is the most talented orator. He is a tremendous writer now. He's smart. You can't say anything bad about Mick, and he's a good, genuine human being. And I think that's why the fans like him more than anything else. I've said this before. Him above anybody else in the business, you can tell, is actually a great guy you'd like to be around. Mm-hmm. With Triple H, I think he's come a long way. I think that his work is good. I should say good. I think his work is great. I think he's had some tremendous matches with a lot of different guys on top lately. I haven't been around him, but I've heard and it's said that he's exercising a lot of leadership and he's into everything and
he's into everything.
He's not the junior member of the clique anymore. I guess is what I have heard and what I could say. He's not that guy that used to hang around with Hall and Nash and Michaels anymore. He's the guy that's grown up and is actually shepherding a positive locker room environment. And I think from what I can tell and what I've seen, like Dave said, he's more dedicated at rehabbing his knee injury and coming back than anybody you've ever seen. Mm-hmm. So, he's proven himself. I might not have thought that 5 years ago, but, when he was hanging around with the clique. But mm-hmm. he's proven himself, and he's the only one, if you notice, of the bunch of them that's still actually valuable in the wrestling business.
Good point. All right, well, listen, thank you very much for your time. Take care.
Okay, you're very welcome. Let's go to Wes. Wes, what's going on?
Hey, guys, how's it going?
It's going good.
Jim, in regards to Brock Lesnar and Shelton Benjamin, how realistic is it that they might be a part of WCW? And also, what do you think that they have to work on when they get to by the time between now and they get to either WWF or WCW?
I think, first of all, it's realistic that any number of these guys might be part of WCW. They're still finalizing their plans, so it's not like they've called me and said, okay, we got a laundry list here or whatever. But that is logically the next step in a company that's going to need a lot of new, fresh faces. And some of these guys are ready. Any of these guys, anybody here, from the first guy to the last guy, would be more ready in 3 months than they are now just because they're all still young in their experience, but there's a number of guys that could carry the ball right now or that could carry their part. As far as Brock and Shelton, I think once again it's only a matter of time. I would be more comfortable just because of their level of time of experience. If Brock was here another 6 months, I think he'd be twice as good as he is now, because he's only been here 7 months. But as far as what they have to work on, Shelton is amazing in the ring. I think that he probably needs to work more on his public speaking. Brock is a better public speaker, but Shelton's passed him in the ring. But Shelton started first. So, you can't just put a timetable on these guys, and I always say that. Every single one of them is going to be better in 6 months than they are right now. But there's some that's ready to go right now. So they're always going to be working on stuff. But, we can't wait as long as we used to. You don't have a guy in the business 7 or 8 years usually that is first being seen on a national basis, which is why Flash is so good.
Now, when you talk about people being ready, who are the guys? I mean, because the one guy when I watch your TV now that I think, if I was running something that I would not, like as far as like a WCW, I wouldn't bring him in day one because then he'd be lost in that shuffle of 30 new guys, right? But maybe a month, 2 months down, I would start teasing bringing him in, and maybe bring him in 3 months. And is Rico Constantino? There's something about him. I think he's got the character. I think he's improved in the ring to the point where he's ready. I mean, I don't know. What's your thoughts as far as Rico and some of the other guys?
Exactly. I mean, they could call Rico to do something tomorrow, and he'd be ready to go. And he's going to be better in 6 months. But he's one of the guys where really they've done what they can do besides being in this business 5 more years. I mean, there's nothing else that they can do to improve themselves otherwise than constantly being in the ring all the time. And that's for the WWF guys that are on the full-time roster. That's the only thing a lot of them can do to improve is the same situation. So Rico would be ready right now. I think Nick Dinsmore could handle himself in the ring. I think he would be he would be more comfortable if he had more time for because if you've noticed, his promos are improving. And a year ago he couldn't hardly say "Suey" if the hogs had him, but now he's speaking a lot better. His entrance is better. He's carrying himself better. So all of the guys are improving, but some of them, like I said, could go right now. I wouldn't have a problem with seeing Flash go and hang with guys in the ring. Dinsmore hung with Benoit at the Gardens, and Flash is going to, I think, tear the place down with Jericho. But they're all still young, and they can all still show improvement in their personalities. But Rico is probably as close to being the package as anybody here right now.
Anything else, Wes?
Yeah, a couple of questions about Smoky Mountain, actually. I was watching a couple tapes a couple of weeks back, and I saw Bob Holly. How did because I don't remember him going straight from Smoky Mountain to the WWF.
Well,
what happened?
He didn't actually. He went straight from Smoky Mountain to welding. Bob, I had seen Bob in the late 80s when he was coming up from Alabama with a guy you may remember from the obscure distant past named Pat Rose. And I said, that Holly is tremendous. He's like a Bobby Eaton, and he wrestled a lot like him. So when I started Smoky Mountain, Robert Gibson was coming up from Alabama, so I said, Holly? Yeah, I know Holly. Bring Holly with you. And Bob started making, the trips up for television, and, he was doing the knee off the top better than anybody I've seen since Bobby Eaton, and he was doing a lot of stuff off the top that he doesn't do now because he's had, a number of injuries. But at any rate, he wrestled in Smoky Mountain on the TVs and everything for about the first 3 months, but then it basically had become, I got to, pursue my real job where I make my money and support myself, or continue making these wrestling trips for practically nothing. So he went back to being a full-time welder. And then Percy Pringle, Paul Bearer, who also was a friend of Bob's from Alabama, had suggested him for something. I can't remember what, and I had always told him, hey, this kid's great, and blah, blah, blah. And so they finally just took a look at him, and the race car thing was what interested Vince, and, off he went.
What's so funny is I'm now picturing the early tapes of Bob Holly and Smokey, and I mean, he looks exactly 180 degrees different than he looks today.
Oh yeah.
I mean, long brunette hair. If anything, his physique was his weakness then, not his strength. I mean, Bob a hell of a high-flying wrestler too.
He had actually competed in some bodybuilding contests before that he came to Smoky Mountain, but he wasn't able to stay in training because he was welding.
Oh, okay.
And so he actually had a pretty dadgum good physique. He wasn't as big and mature as he is today, but he had a pretty good one even before that. And he had just not been in training.
Yeah. But, I mean, I just remember him flying all over, and now, and it's like just a totally different guy. It's the same guy, man. He didn't seem so surly then either.
Yeah, well, he was a big bumper and very Bobby Eaton-like in his work, which is what it attracted me to him first. And as a matter of fact, originally I was going to use him. Possibly he had been under consideration as one of the heavenly bodies, and it just didn't work out.
I think anybody who got the gimmick Sparky Plug would end up a little surly.
Yeah, probably.
Wes, we're going to have to get running, okay?
Okay, thanks a lot.
Oh, okay, you're very welcome. And Brian's life is about to change very shortly.
Uh-oh.
Because, you know why?
Oh, I thought you said his wife was about to change.
Now, mine is. But
she already had the operation.
But, no. Brian spends many hours every day being mad at people for making the most illogical suggestions on who the stalker is, and time is running out. So if you got any more people who, if you think about this, would make absolutely no sense to work a program with Undertaker, okay? That's the key.
And it's not Paul Bearer.
It's not Paul Bearer.
Get that out of the way first.
And it's not Shawn Michaels either. Anyway.
I'm thinking it's handsome Jimmy Valiant.
He'd be damn entertaining in that role.
Actually.
Oh, mercy, Undertaker. Your boogeyman loves you.
You know,
and your wife.
I almost have to get him on this show for like 15 minutes just to do that stuff. Oh, my God. We got 2 winners, by the way, of the question, so there's still one more on who was the other Olympic gold medalist to have been a wrestler in the World Wrestling Federation, besides Kurt Angle. So we got one winner who doesn't surprise me at all, because actually if I would have had to pick one person who was going to get that question right, it was he. So anyway, and he knows who he is. Let's go to Dominic in New York. Dominic, what's going on?
Gentlemen, it's been 10 months since I called, but
damn you.
Things have changed way too much in the past 10 months. Last time I talked to you, I was on my way to the Hammerstein Ballroom for the tag team tournament for ECW, so things have changed a little bit since then. Could you keep me informed? I have missed everything. How's things going in WCW right now?
Actually, they're like
up.
Okay,
yeah.
It's just as good as it was before. All right.
Yeah, they're picking up, and the leader's out there dancing.
Beautiful, beautiful. Jim, I'd say I did just recently get your shoot interview with RF Video, and I do love the Eric Bischoff Corvette talk you did with the lovely giant snot up your nose you put on there.
Yeah, just so everybody doesn't get the wrong idea, I once put a booger on Eric Bischoff's Corvette.
Well, there's no confusion there.
Okay, also, with that tape, I did also get, unfortunately, since I know how much you hate Ian Ron's promotion, I recently got my first Combat Zone tape. Oh, luckily, it was the junior heavyweight tournament. And with some of the crap I've seen in the middle, I can understand your feelings on IWA. With these, the first thing I saw was a guy taking, swear to God, a Death Valley driver from a balcony through a table, and it literally made me visibly sick.
Well, that's a visual I could do without, but I share your opinion. But you know what? As long as there's guys stupid enough to do these things, and promoters / wannabe wrestlers sick, demented, and desperate for attention enough to put them on, unfortunately, I think we're stuck with them.
Mm. But at least with that tape, I did see a couple really good wrestlers. I don't know if you've seen them yet. Mainly Mark and Jay Briscoe, who put on a phenomenal match for a couple 18-year-olds, plus Red at the SATs. I don't know if you've seen or heard anything from them yet.
No, I haven't seen the Briscoes, but I've heard about them. Something about the name is familiar. No, I'm looking forward to seeing those guys because I've heard a lot of good things. I think basically they need. From what I've heard, just put on some size and grow. They're only, 16, 17?
16,
17, yeah. They just need more ring time.
Yeah,
and hopefully, to stay away from those promotions that will, hasten the early retirement.
Well, I do think
they do some stuff that I kind of wish they wouldn't, or at least until they get to the top, where the risk is at least worth the reward.
The Tiger Driver 91s and the suplexes to the head.
And the three-way superplexes, on this guy's shoulder, on this guy's shoulder, trying to do a superplex. That's really dangerous.
Yeah.
And Red to me looks like
one of the things that more than anything that young guys need is not how to work hard, but work smart. They already work hard. Everybody works hard, but they desperately need guidance in how to work smart and pick your spots and etc.
Something, and it's a real hard deal. And I want to bring this up to Jim because it's kind of like the New Japan way and All Japan way of training these guys. Is they'll put those guys in the ring in opening matches, and the women, All Japan women used to do this too. And they're basically limited to like 5 or 6 moves, your arm drags and, the basic stuff, abdominal stretches and all that. And you got to go in there with a 10-minute match only doing that basic stuff. But by the time that year and a half is over, I mean, they got no problems with basics and they'd have no problems with, and then they start doing then they start coming up with their own individual moves.
Yeah,
but it's like,
coincidentally, in that year and a half, they have perfected everything they need to know to make it to the top. Such as how to have a match and what to do and what not to do, and then once that they're getting noticed and once they're being used in a little bit more important position, then they can start throwing in the more spectacular stuff when somebody's paying attention to it. Because a guy that can do a triple moonsault but can't lock up and get a headlock and hit the ropes and take a tackle right is not going to get over anyway. So there's no sense in a lot of these guys putting the cart before the horse and starting with acrobatics instead of starting with basics because nobody's paying any attention to them anyway. They're shortening their career.
I would say it's more like Red, because he looks like Jody Fleisch from about 2 years ago, just doing 850 moonsaults and stuff.
That red guy's really talented.
Oh,
I've seen some tapes on him. And the Maximo guys. I mean, they're small guys, but I mean, like if you watch them in their transitions and stuff, I mean, they've been trained pretty decent. I mean, it's like they do too much. They probably do too much at this stage of their career. But I mean, there's the guys that there are guys that I see that do moves that literally cannot do anything in between their moves, and that's not a wrestling match. I mean, that's they just stand there and then they just long and painfully set up their next stunt. Whereas those guys, I mean, they're doing a lot of real dangerous stuff, but I mean, when they go from move to move for their experience level, and that's the same thing with the Briscoes, for their experience level, they're very, very good.
I mean, the thing of beauty is watching Red standing shooting star press. I mean, that's just a thing of awe. I think for them, the best thing for them would be to go, if they can get away to Japan, go to Michinoku or Torimon, and they could, at least really develop a lot more from there. Before I hang up, I just want Jim's opinion on 2 guys who don't have a job anywhere yet except in the independents, Christopher Daniels and Michael Modest.
Well, I've known Chris Daniels for a long time, and as a matter of fact, I was there in Connecticut when they brought him into camp, and I think he's a tremendous worker. Hello?
Yep. Go ahead.
I heard a click. Chris is tremendous talent all around, and he had a good personality. His size may have hampered him somewhat as far as being noticed, for a job, but I think he's a great talent. And Michael Modest, had a talk with him a few years ago. I said the problem is that he is more like an Arn Anderson than he is a Sid Vicious or a Ric Flair, in that he's not overwhelming with his personality. He's not overwhelming with his size. He's just a very good, solid worker that takes longer to catch on. But if he could catch on, he might be in turn over longer than the guys who rely on appearance or size. So he was just a very good all-around technician, and that takes a while longer to get noticed.
Let's go to Vince in Michigan. Vince, what's up?
Hey, Jim, I was wondering if there was a point. It's kind of widely publicized that over the years you've kind of grown discontent with the wrestling business as far as the way it's been going. And I was just wondering, can you pinpoint an angle or a storyline or an event where you were said, man, what happened to my wrestling? Or
the Undertaker embalmment angle. Remember that one?
That was a landmark. I think the emergence of anything that Vince Russo ever did was that's what made me so disgusted with what had happened to the business. Putting a porta-can in the middle of the ring. Women's stripper, naked silicone, jello, chocolate mudding, pudding, fiascos with women. Anything that Vince Russo ever did stood out in my mind or was responsible for, stood out in my mind as a total disgrace to the wrestling business, which is why I basically wanted to hospitalize him with a baseball bat. But I instead chose to move a number of 100 miles away from him so that temptation wouldn't be present every day.
When's the last time you talked to him?
The story I told when I called him up on his cell phone and told him what a worthless piece of crap he was and that I was glad he'd been fired. And then he
came back. They brought him back to kill the company.
Children.
They brought him back to kill the company like 3 months later, 5 months later.
Yeah, that was the last time I spoke to him. I'd love to speak to him again, but I don't want him to complain to the FCC or the American Civil Liberties Union that I'm threatening his entire species or something. He's a lying, conniving, cowardly, non-talented, illiterate sack of snake feces. There, we've said it. Vince, please call me. If you call me, then you can't complain about anything, and I could curse you still.
What a show that would be here. You can say anything. Yes. It's the Internet.
You'd have to either have a bleeper, a delay, or be uncensored, because I couldn't be around Vince Russo without telling him what I really think of him, which would require a lot of profanity. He's too cowardly. I'd like to fight him. I'll challenge him here. I'd love to fight his ass. But he's too much of a coward. I think what he did to the business, and the respect or lack of that he gave almost everybody in it, and the overall clown show aspect of his presentation deserves an ass whipping. I'd love to be the one to give it to him.
I was also wondering, was there any names, interesting names that you tried to or wanted to bring into SMW that never worked out for one reason or another?
I talked to Terry Taylor at one time where they were just keeping him in the power plant and not having him wrestle, but since he was still kind of technically under contract at there was some technical thing that Bischoff, once he found out that he was working for me, could have pulled him away from me, which prevented me from being able to really do anything, major like I wanted to. So Terry Taylor didn't work out, luckily, almost everybody that I ever really wanted to work there got the chance to, at least for a little while. Dustin Rhodes was another guy that didn't work out, wanted to do something there, and he got the spot, in the WWF. But, not a ton of guys.
Appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Matt in Brooklyn. Matt, what's up?
Hi. I have 3 questions.
Okay.
What do you think of Jake the Snake getting arrested?
I wasn't shocked. I don't know what to think of it, but I wasn't,
It's just sad to read about a blood alcohol content so high, and then the guy goes and pleads not guilty.
Oh, what was his blood? I didn't hear what his blood alcohol content was.
I have it written down, so I'll email it to you tonight. It was high.
Okay.
This is a part of the question. I saw Beyond the Mat. Is he still Snake taking drugs? Because he's wanting to work for ECW for drugs or something, I've heard.
ECW. I think he didn't work for ECW because he came once and then, him and Paul Lee
that's what I meant.
Him and Paul Lee kind of didn't, they weren't on the same page, and I think he no-showed or something, or I forget what it was, but they had their problem. I don't know that was drug-related, but...
Also,
it was Jake-related.
What about Scott Hall having a seizure?
I know there's the same story with when he worked for Jim, actually. Okay, go ahead.
What about Scott Hall having a seizure? What do you think about that?
I don't know what to think of it. I just...
I didn't know about it.
Yeah, that was a couple weeks ago.
It happened about last weekend?
Yeah, last weekend. I think what it tells us is that a lot of times, this actually goes for Jake Roberts and many other people in the wrestling business, that when their friends tell you that they are completely clean to get them jobs, oftentimes their friends are mistaken.
Yep.
So that's what it means.
Out of the mouths of babes.
Yes.
Also, I have a question for Mr. Cornette.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Who was the best wrestler or tag team you have ever managed?
The best wrestler or tag team, the Midnight Express. I shall narrow it down no further than that.
That I believe.
I believe it too. Everyone believes it. We got Vincent. We got Vincent Georgia, who I don't think is that Vincent Georgia, is it?
Yeah, it's Vincent in Georgia.
Oh, man, we were hoping for the other Vincent Georgia.
You even had to change your name to not be confused with the other guy.
In a mall in Atlanta, but that's a whole other story. I just had a comment and a few questions. First of all, Jim, big fan of yours. Most people who are newer to wrestling or newer fans don't understand how popular or how much Jim Cornette meant to this business. I can recall seeing Mr. Cornette down here. You remember the Mamisso Auditorium in Columbus, Georgia, Mr. Cornette?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, y'all were down here, almost every month, and it was a big part of my life growing up with wrestling. A lot of people grew up with the WWF, but I grew up down here in Georgia, and it was just the Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express was a big part of my youth, and it was just a great time. I think the wrestling business in general has lost that trait of what you brought. I mean, Cornette got people over. That they can keep their mouth shut, and they were over when they stepped into that ring because of Cornette. I remember hating the Midnight Express, especially when they were feuding with the Rock and Roll Express. I just remember hating your guys because of you. It was just great.
Well, thank you very much. There's only one thing better than being loved, and that's being hated.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it was more of a respect. I mean, you just had to respect what he brought to the business. But my question, I have two quick questions. First of all, one's for Dave, is basically with the trouble the WWF's been having recently with getting a slot for WCW and with the ratings issues, do you think they would still be having these same problems if they were still with USA Network?
I don't think USA Network would have been so hot on adding another wrestling show either. I mean, the ratings were higher on USA, but, you know, it's really, that's a real hard question to say because it's just different management, and I don't know, you'd have to know the management. I mean, I think that there was a time when TNN would have loved to have another wrestling slot, but evidently that's not the time now, and some, you know, I really can't, I mean, I understand they don't want to be the wrestling station at the same time. What it would hurt to add 2 more hours of wrestling on the station, considering the boost it would give their overall rating. You know, it's a very...
And considering the show that would be replaced.
Yeah, they're going to replace a show that does...
Nothing on that station is replaceable.
I know.
Definitely. And my next question is, I guess for all y'all, is right now I think the WWF's in a spot they haven't been in a few years, and the fact is they really don't have an up-and-coming star that's really fixing to break through. I mean, my opinion is you have main event wrestlers, and then you have wrestlers that are in the main event. And I think right now, do you see anybody on their roster right now that really... Because when I look at their roster, I don't see another Rock. I don't see another Austin. I see a lot of good people. I see some people now, it seems different. The WWF actually is having to push people instead of the fans dictating who's going to be in that main event. I just don't see anybody on their roster right now that could... could be the next Rock or the next Austin. I think their ratings are starting to show that now. Do you see anybody on their roster that even has a chance?
You know, the only problem is when Austin was the ringmaster, you could look at the roster and say, boy, I don't see the next Steve Austin. And he was there.
I think, and I had an argument with a friend of mine. I said that, especially with Jericho, they're trying to push Jericho, but they haven't really. Jericho's really the same Jericho he's been since he's been in WWF. Austin, and especially The Rock, and all of them, they kind of had a change in personality.
They changed a lot,
their persona changed, and that's what really got them over. I think the WWF's trying to push Jericho, but he's still the same Jericho that everybody's been seeing for the last year.
Well, but see, here's the thing: is you try to push guys, and you do push them, and you get some of them over, but some of the, like you're talking about The Rock and Austin, they didn't get over because of a push. They caught on, and then they got pushed. And so somebody out there could very well change hats, and all of a sudden they catch on, or they say the right thing and they catch on, and then they start getting pushed. So you're never going to see the next Steve Austin or Rock. You're going to see the guy that, boy, he might look like he could do something, but there's plenty of those out there.
Yeah,
the question is, you know, what's going to happen for the next guy to get over, and you can never foresee that.
Oh, yeah, and you're hoping that's going to happen soon, because I really think, and the ratings are showing it, that in the house show business is starting to show that fans are not really caring about the people that are being highlighted on their shows right now. And
I don't know if it shows they don't care. I think it shows that they're comfortable with them.
Maybe comfortable, I think, or they're...
Nothing's shaking them up.
I think the fact that it's also, and I think this just comes with the business, the fact that it's a high-dollar ticket also. And they were just down in our area not too long ago, and the tickets just want to sell for the Atlanta show, and there's still plenty left for the Phillips Arena show.
I don't think that has anything to do with how much it costs to buy the tickets, though, because if it were hot, the thing would have been sold out immediately.
Yeah. But I think it's a combination.
I don't buy the ticket price thing either.
But I think it's a combination that they're wanting $55 to see who are they highlighting. Why should I spend $55 to go to Raw? That's the question.
Well, I mean, the whole deal is that people would have when it was hot, and it's not hot, so it's harder to sell tickets. I mean, it's the product. It's cool. You know, it just cooled off. I think one of the things with Jericho, I mean, there's a lot of things with Jericho. One of them is, you're right, he's the same exact character he was as a mid-card guy, and also he got a real good TV push for 2 weeks, but then he got pinned by Rhino, actually twice in the middle of his push, so it's like that kind of stalled the push. And actually that was, there were things that they've done with Jericho that just perplex me, and to this day no one's given me any kind of an explanation as to why, when a guy who needs all the help he can get to be a main eventer, because the people aren't ready for him in that role, and you're shoving him so hard that you beat him on the way. I don't understand it.
Sort of like Bischoff booking.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I guess so. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. That's all.
Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay, we're totally out of time. I wish this
I'll tell you
another
one thing
hour.
real quick, Dave. I've never seen anybody do a stupid thing without a really good reason in their mind. So you never know.
That's true. That is true.
I wish we had another hour on this one. Jim, thank you very much. Good luck on that show.
Thank you. OVWrestling.com. Yay.
That's right. And I can't wait to see the tapes of that thing. And I just love the idea of when I'm watching a TV show, and when that show is over, I know every match on the card. My girlfriend knows every match on your next
when
card.
The show is over. Like, man, I just got screwed.
Yeah.
Thank you guys very much.
Okay, Jim, you're doing a great job. You really are.
Thank you.
Okay, we will be back tomorrow. It'll be the only day of the week that Brian and I have without a guest. And then on Wednesday, we're going to have Jacques Rougeau. We'll see you all tomorrow at 5.